the second sort of path to decision makers I found is usually that's usually extremely useful, and this is in a very hands-on manner, is women in the conference room, so women in the boardroom. And of course, there are other things at play here. Is that one, if you're sitting in a boardroom and there's a woman there, she's probably in her career, and I say this as someone who was also raised by a successful woman executive, they probably had to be much better at their job to reach that level than most of their male counterparts. And I found, very often that the women in the boardroom have a much better overall concept of the services and the products that their group may need from time to time to renew their success. So they may not ask questions as frequently as their male counterparts, but be very aware of the discussion, because the way it tended to go is that we would have a question and answer, and 4 or 5 of the men in the room would ask about this new product and would take copious amounts of notes and then ask again. And then when we reached what we thought was going to be the very end of the conversation, say, well, how do we think we should proceed? Invariably, the woman in the conference room would then ask a more conceptual question based on the facts that had been asked before, about how these new products and services would then actually be implemented in a way. Conversation for many minutes, bouncing back and forth between the men in the room, and then 20 minutes later, a broader question asked about the implementation and how best to work together by the woman in the conference room. And I think this is probably similar in most countries, but certainly in Japan, where if you take into account the more broad knowledge of the needs of the company that woman in the conference room has, and the fact that, again, much like the Japanese expatriate, they may be seen as an outlier within the company, someone who is a bit different from the mold of the other people sitting in the room. This kind of differentiation leads to new products and new concepts being more readily accepted if they're brought by the woman in the conference room than by her, quote, ordinary male colleagues. It's seen as by the other decision makers, it's seen as that yes, we would expect a new concept to be brought through that person. And if you're aware of that, as someone who is bringing their product or service to Japan for the first time, that can be an extremely useful tool for you. So recognize the differentiation in that person's career probably had to take to get them to that conference room, and the fact that it can be a real advantage if your ally in the discussion is the woman in the conference room.